Now, is this going to be on, like in here?
Should be, is it? Let's see. Oh, yeah, there you go. Just,
Check, check, check. And is there a clicky? All right, folks. Gather around, gather around. We only have a few minutes.
just click down, advance.
Down to advance and up to.
31 minutes.
Okay.
Ring the bell.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sticking around for this. I gave a talk at the Wild Goose Festival in July of last year. If anybody's interested in new ways to do church, fresh expressions, things to liven up, please do consider coming to the Wild Goose Festival. It is a Jesus-centered, kind of a post-church festival centered around social justice, art, and music. And Merrill came last time, and a few others. Pardon? It was awesome. It's highly worth it. It's my favorite spiritual thing of the year, but this is adapted. What I'm about to talk to you about is adapted from that presentation. And I'm in discussions, should find out something this upcoming week, with a publisher to write a book on the secrets of the deep, the hidden wisdom of fishing, and how it can change your life and save the church. Well, we need to be honest with ourselves that the church is declining, at least in numbers. In the last 10 years, the Diocese of Virginia has lost 30%. So, fishing is one way that we might be able to think differently about how God relates to us and how we as St. Mary's can relate to our communities and our neighborhoods. Are we fishing at all? And then if we are, where are we fishing? Oh, more on that. Okay. Joel? There we go. Oh, it's user error. Okay, so if fishing can change your life, then we need to talk about what the problems of life are. And one of the bigger ones is a despair and a disconnection from God. In all cultures, we have stories, different religious stories about how God relates to us and how to connect with God. We have those stories because it's not easy to do so. That's part of why we come here. So one of the central human conditions is this disconnection from God. And also a disintegration from community. So Sam Wells talks about, he is a British theologian, and he says, it's not mortality that is the greatest threat to human flourishing, it's isolation. So we tend to think that we all fear death. But really, he says, what we really fear is isolation. And over the last couple of years, we have seen what isolation can do. And studies have shown, particularly our older folks who were not able to get that human contact and interaction. Their brain chemistry changed, and folks have really gone downhill because we're so isolated. What that gives us is a hopelessness, despair, and of course, isolation. So, that's the bad. But the good, the solution to these things are connection to God and integration with the whole creation, active joy and wonder. So, as much as I do like indoor plumbing, but there is something odd about the fact that for most of humanity's tenure on Earth, we have been outside a lot. And now, since the Industrial Revolution particularly, and the abandonment of an agrarian lifestyle, we have built places to live inside and I see Paul. Is it in Bowling Alone, where he talks about you go to work and then you get in your car and then you go and you drive into your driveway and then you're already in your house, and then so you never get a chance to be outside. And one of the things that we found in Wilderness Church over the last year, Wilderness Church is an outdoor walking service in a park, is that you can do it in the cold. People are like, well, what? I'll catch on in the spring. I said, actually, we're doing it next Sunday and the Sunday after. And those who have been at the really cold, we averaged 23 last winter, 23 people in the cold, in the snow. We had 23 people come. And when you do that, it's like, oh my God, you did it too. Like, we're both crazy. But the spirit is strongest when the weather is not so good. And then we integrate into the whole creation. And this is something that fishing can do for you. The thing about fishing is that you can't do it from your couch. Like, you literally can't fish inside. The only caveat being the guys like up in Wisconsin that do the ice fishing, but they're still outside. It's a shed that they're in. But you literally can't do it. You have to go outside. So if you're thinking like, gosh, I wish there was something that I could do, like I really need to connect with nature more, I will take you. Or find someone and go fishing, because you have to do it outside. You can do it alone, or you can do it with other people. This is Deb Henke on the left. In October, we took a group of us during our Fish Sing, and Sing stands for Spirituality in Nature group. We went down to Sandbridge Beach, and she was the only one that caught a fish. There were 14 of us, so we had a lot of lines in the water. But Deb caught a fish. Look at that face. He's so happy to have caught something. And flounder weren't really even in season, and we weren't fishing for them, but that's what came, this unknown, uncontrollable experience of fishing brings things that you just can't imagine. And then on the right, this is Daniel Branch Brioso with where is Daniel? Is he here? He's here. Did we weigh that fish? No, we did not. Well, it's at least 30 pounds, don't you think? Fishing lends itself to the imagination. Okay? But one of the things it does is give you active joy. Active joy. You also have connection to God, integration, and then this joy and wonder. How do you connect to God? You are in God's house. You are in the creation that God brings to us. And if you come fishing to one place for one time, you get this wonderful experience. But if you go back to that same place 2 times and 3 times, suddenly the trees and the bushes start to become known to you. You're like, this is the tree that I stand next to when I fish. And all of a sudden, what is 2-dimensional becomes animated for you and becomes 3-dimensional, even if you don't catch anything. So, whoops. Are you trying to override me? I thought. That is a hell of a communications director. He knows your gaps. Okay, how fishing helps wonder, active love, disappointment, and patience. Life is disappointing a lot of the time. But to do something just for the sake of doing it helps us with being disappointed that maybe you don't catch a fish. So Martin Luther said, if there was only one day left, if he knew that the world was going to end tomorrow, he would plant a tree today because it's worth doing. Planting a tree today is worth doing, even if you know the world is going to end tomorrow. Okay? So this is something that fishing can do. You may not catch anything, but the doing of it brings you outside. It brings you next to and into God's creation. And that creation is how we knew about God before God began speaking to us, began speaking to Noah and Abraham. We understood, and different cultures understood who and what God is by the natural world. We have a cycle, as you have noticed, of life and death and resurrection, and life and death and resurrection in our creation. Okay, and these are a few pictures that show the wonder of this magnificent thing that God has given us. The edge of the sea, especially. You are at the edge of creation if you heard the really phenomenal sermon this morning. The oldest sound in the universe is the sound of water moving. And so that's the oldest sound in the universe. And so when you are at the edge of the sea, you are at the edge of creation. You are at the edge of eternity and at the edge of yourself. And these waves are coming at you and then rolling back and coming and rolling back. Meryl, could you share your reflection on God and the waves?
At the end of the fishing retreat, we were standing watching waves, and then it occurred to me that, thanks, Joel. As I was standing looking at the waves, I think my experience with being one of the 14 that did not catch a fish, and continuing to put your line back in the water, is that the waves for me felt like God coming to us over and over again. Perhaps as the waves go back out again, we're pushing against it, and yet He comes again. And that constancy and the going back to the beginning of the universe feeling was profound, despite the not catching feeling. We weren't there to catch fish, we were there to fish. So the repeat of the waves.
And of course it's beautiful. It's beautiful, especially at the beach. This was during a happy moment, Father and Son. And there we all are on the pier. And the thing about the pier is that you're above the water. You get to walk out a little bit. And there's people, not all of these are our people. There are some folks all over the place. And in the very back there, as the end of the pier faces the wide ocean, during red drum season or redfish season, which is in the fall, when they're really running, they'll have 20 poles straight out, all right next to each other. Boom, 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 like this. And if somebody does catch a fish, everybody works together to lift your pole up under, and you go. It's an interesting culture, the pier culture. So you have lots of different kinds of people fishing together, rich people and poor people. And everybody is out there together because you've all decided to do this thing at this time. So you are in some ways kindred with anybody who is fishing when you're fishing. I helped this dude. This is a pier net here. This is a great big giant thing. And you lower it down into the water, and you got to have somebody to lower it into the water while the other person is reeling. You can't do those two things at once. And because you're lifting the fish up out of the water, you have a tremendous strain on the line. And the line will break, and you'll hurt the fish unless you use a net like this. So this guy's name is Jeffrey. He's 19 years old. He goes to the local community college. I gathered sometimes. And he was out there every day. And he caught a redfish there. So this is us. Really enjoying this day. The wind was up, and the weather was not perfect, but the waves were amazing because they just came in giant, the power and the uncontrollability. So much of our lives we like to control. Anybody notice there's a problem? Or anybody notice that other people have a problem with control? Witnessing what only God controls can make us smaller, and can make us want to fit into this rather than dominate and control. You can't see this, but this is Hoop. In her face, she's not happy because we're not catching any fish. And of course, you have these sunsets and sunrises that are just astonishing. And this is our whole group. We have 14 of us, including Joel's mother who came. Can I tell that story? Yeah, please do. Okay. So Joel's mother had been exiled from the church. Do you want to tell it?
You can.
All right. Exiled from the church for many, many years. Grew up Catholic. And she told him, I only found this out later, but they live in Sandbridge, so she came and would join us on our fishing. And we had Eucharist on the beach on Sunday morning. And I mean, it's amazing. It was so beautiful. And we got the birds flying, and there's just an expansiveness to your vision, to what you see in front of you, opens your heart and calms your blood pressure. And so she's out there, and she had told Joel, she said, I'm not going to take communion. I'll come, but I don't want to take communion. But you see, we weren't in a church. We were outside. We were in a different place, which maybe didn't have the memories and the triggering traumas of her past experience in the Catholic Church. And the way we did Eucharist was that we had pita bread and we shared it. So we communed each other around in a circle. And not only, because of that, not only did she receive communion for the first time in maybe 2 decades, but she gave it to the person next to her. That's incredible. That never would have happened if we hadn't taken what we do here and tried to translate it slightly and move it to a place where the fish are. Fishing is also story-based and family-oriented. Raise your hand if you can remember the first time you went fishing. It's amazing. Raise your hand if that was with a family member. Yeah. So there's something about fishing that lends itself to story. Could you, to raise your hand if you could tell the story of the first time you went fishing? Well, look, y'all raised your hands and said that you went, so I know you could tell the story. But it's story-based and it's often family-oriented. And it's still, you have more male fisher people than female fisher people. And the only reason is that we don't take our daughters fishing for some reason. So it can be an egalitarian, gender-neutral, and it should be, a gender-neutral activity. But we're here at a church. We are story-based people. There, as Frederick Buechner says, there really is only one story, and that is the story of Christ. But when we make stories together, when we go out into God's creation and fish for something that we can't see, usually, and you can't control, would you let the creation around you guide you? Then we begin to find touch points to where we can graft ourselves on to the story of Christ. Okay, so going deeper. When we fish, we integrate into the mystery of God's creation. It is a mystery. It is a mystery to me that I was there for days before we had that retreat, and I didn't catch anything either. And Deb was the person who fished for the least amount of time. I didn't feel bad about it. But you just never know. You never know what's going to happen when you walk outside and say, I'm just going to throw this hook out and see. But you need to be prepared. I was at Emerald Isle a couple summers ago, and I went out fishing. I was on what's called an inlet. So you have the big ocean over here, and then you have kind of the intercoastal waterway, and there's an inlet that kind of connects those two. There's very, very strong currents. It is very, very deep. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was just getting back into this thing, and so I throw out some like little worms or something, and I caught what's called a lizard fish, because it's about this big around, about that long, and it looked like a lizard. And I thought, I'm going to just put this on a hook. Like this whole big lizard fish, I'm going to put it on a hook and throw it out there, because why not? Who knows? Like, I don't know if there's anything out there, but maybe there is. And that's the thing. If you want to catch bigger fish, you need bigger bait. That's totally there. I had no idea there were 60-pound catfish in the Potomac River, but if you put bait big enough on there, that's what happens. You catch big fish. So I throw it out there, and I lean it up. My pole up against a bucket. I got another pole, and I'm fishing for Spanish mackerel. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to catch any Spanish mackerel either. I'm just down here. All of a sudden, I turn, and my pole, which was not a cheap piece of equipment, is rocketing into the inlet. Now, there are signs all over that say, swimming is illegal. Not just don't do it, you're not allowed, because the drop-off is very, very steep and the currents are very, well, I'm a former baseball player, diving straight out into this deep water, and the pole just comes right underneath and then off into the depths. And there was a kindly man who was fishing nearby, and he said, "You didn't bring your sand spike, did you?" Which is what you put the pole in. He's like, "That's an expensive lesson." He kind of kept going on with, like, "Thanks, man." He said, we were talking about maybe a 4 or 5 foot shark. He's like, the way that thing came rocketing out like that, like it was huge things out there. But you also have to be prepared. Okay. And we'll get to that in a second. So this connection to the mystery, but it's mysterious to see these amazing things that we don't normally see. Cultivate belonging. We belong to this entire creation. Kate once said that this whole ecosystem is like a living thing itself. But we are part of it. We are part of it. If we can get outside and spend more time outside in the wilds of God's creation, we can recognize the wilds that are within us. We also depend on nature for healing. When we were in Navajo land, the canon out there, Reverend Cornelia Eaton, talked about being in nature as something that was almost required for healing and for forgiveness. And she said there's something about being out in nature that soothes our wounds and gives us the strength to then forgive those who have hurt us. We need to do that, and to be on the edge of the waters, on the edge of creation. Okay, Fish Sing, Spirituality and Nature Group, quickly. In Arlington, there's a Center for Spirituality and Nature. Okay, and so they are run. The executive director is a Methodist, but they have a broad spectrum. So you have some folks that are not religious in any sense, but they have recognized something about being outside. And then you have folks like us who are very religious. They got a grant from the Tri-Tank. That is Virginia Theological Seminary. It's not a think tank, it's a Tri-Tank. So they have some money, and they throw some money here and some money there for people that want to try new things. So what the Spirituality and Nature Center did was they collected, and it's sort of ecumenical and non-religious, but they collected a group of Episcopal spirituality and nature groups. And they invited us as our fishing ministry to be a part of that. So there are groups on the West Coast, in the Midwest, and then us, in a couple of seminaries. And they all meet monthly, and their leader trainings and things like that. And so what we do monthly is fishing as a spiritual practice. And we have monthly fishing outings. And our next one is going to be in late January. And Joel and I were talking, and I was like, maybe we should just pick it up in March. And then I realized, like, if I believe one thing about Wilderness Church, then I need to believe that we should go out and fish, because the fish are out there and they'll bite. Joel's going to talk just briefly about that. But other spiritual touch points. So everything about fishing can be drawn to your spirituality. So the knots. How many fish have I lost because I just wanted to get the line in the water? You get there, you're so excited. You're like, you just tie the hook on and throw it out. Well, when you do that and a big fish gets on your line, the haste in which you tied that knot becomes a liability. And so in our own spiritual lives, how hasty are we with the knots that we're tying between us and God? Or are we taking some time to really intentionally wrap one line around the other to make sure that that knot is strong and taut? Weights, same thing. So you throw a weight out there that keeps your bait where it needs to be to catch the fish. If you don't have the right kind of weight, or any weight at all, your bait is going to be flowing with the current. And so what are the weights in our lives that can root us where we need to be? St. Mary's, of course, is one of those weights. Preparation is hope. So much despair in this world, and hopelessness, and just gray blankness. But every cast is an act of hope. It really is true. Because you wouldn't throw the lure out there if you didn't, in even the smallest way, want to catch something. That's a desire. That's a hope. So even as you're saying, let's go fishing, and you're packing up your car to go somewhere, that is an act of hope. And if all you can do that day is say, you know what, like I went fishing and it didn't feel hopeful, but I know that that is an act of hope. That's something. And that might be just enough for you that day. I mean, it does get frustrating if you don't catch anything, but and this transfer of energy. Fish evolved around 500 million years ago. The fish that we know now. So when you do feel a tug at the end of that line, that energy comes from 500 million years of evolution. And that energy transfers through the fishing line, through the pole, and into your hands. That's how you feel that energy of this thing that has been evolving and been around for millions and millions of years, and grew up who knows where, and then ended up right around where you are and sent that energy through the line, through the pole, and into your hands. It's incredible. So thinking like a fisher person, what do you want to catch? A lot of people think that maybe the church is getting a little bit older. So if we want to catch younger people, then we have to figure out what they eat. We have to figure out what bait is going to work for the fish that we're going to catch. The Episcopal Church tends to be pretty white, by and large. If we want to have more diversity in our church and bring Christ to different people, then we're going to have to go to different places. Otherwise, things are going to be just the same. 90% of the fish are in 10% of the water. Did you know that? 10% of the water holds 90% of the fish. Okay, so in our lives as a church, are we fishing in the right waters? Or are we in that 90% of the water that only has 10% of the fish? in your own spiritual life. What does that mean for you? So know your species. And then what do you want from God? What do you want to catch? And then what do you need from God to catch that? So if you thought about your soul as a fishing person, your fishing soul, then what does your soul want to catch? What does your soul want for your life and for your future? And then what might you need from God to help make that happen? And finally, how might God be fishing for you if you are the fish? What is God using to try to attract you or to come after you and to get you on the line? Joel, could you talk to us a little bit about fishing in your experience?
Sure. Well, thank you, Pete, and thank you all for joining today. You know, working with Father Pete and the Tri-Tank on Fish Sing has been a real privilege. It's been fun, and it's helped me to ask a lot of the questions that Pete had posed, as well as to get back into fishing. When I came here and I saw Pete was a fisherman, one of the first articles I saw in the Messenger before I came here was him holding this huge catfish. I guess it's that big one. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. And I had just gotten back into doing some fishing, and so watching Pete encouraged me to get back into that. Fish Sing is great on so many levels. You know, one, yes, there need to be more girls in fishing. My 6-year-old can cast a line like no other. Sometimes she's better than I am now. So there is hope. It is just great to be out in God's creation. You don't know what you're going to get. There's that mystery. You don't know who you're going to meet. I took a hike the other day and actually ran into a couple guys fishing down at the Potomac at the mouth of Donaldson Run. And they were telling me they were getting stuff, but they only spoke Spanish. So I was using my limited Spanish to speak with them. But you don't know who you're going to run into. They were young guys about my age, I determined. But they were out having a great time, listening to their music, different music than what I listened to, and fishing. And then they pointed out that there was a beaver. You don't know what kind of nature you're going to see. It's actually the Wilderness Church beaver. There's a whole other story on that, but I saw that famous beaver yesterday. So you don't know who you're going to meet, what you're going to catch, what animals you're going to see. I was fishing at Lake Accotink in Springfield a while back, and I'm walking down. I hadn't caught anything, and I was really disappointed. I'm just walking back, but I'm taking everything in, and a hawk goes down and snatches a mouse just 15 feet away from me. And if I wasn't out in God's creation, I wouldn't have seen that. You just never know. And there is a lot of great fishing around here. That's what Pete has shown me, and I've come to realize you never know what you're going to find. I've caught eels on 4 Mile Run right behind my house where it starts up at the Falls Church border. So I would just encourage anyone if you're just interested in trying fishing, if you want to explore nature, through fishing, a lot of times faith comes up. I've been at Fish Sing where we're talking to someone whose wife is struggling with health problems and just came to the area and, just needed a little boost. And in talking to this individual, it also gave me more insight on my own faith in dealing with challenges. So I could go on forever and ever, but I won't. But I would invite everybody and encourage anyone who's interested to join us. We're happy to teach you. We have some gear. If you have your own gear or want to get gear, it can be very cheap. You don't need fancy equipment. All you need to do is just get out there, step on the edge of God's creation, and try to catch something.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. Bob, did you want to say anything?
Sure. I'm Bob Holmes. I had the opportunity to go on the Sandbridge trip, and I thank you, Father Pete, for this ministry. It's really fun. And I have to say, like the Hoops and everyone else, I didn't catch a fish, but it really was a transformational weekend for me and for our family, because we were spending time with people in the church that we normally wouldn't spend time with. I helped Matt. I see Matt getting up. I helped Matt cook dinner one night. He was telling me how to cut the chilies and everything. But we got to spend time together and be with each other. And as Pete said, we got to be in nature. And that, when you're alone fishing by yourself with people and you're not catching fish like we were, you end up talking to people and you get to know people better. And the beauty of the church is, I think, is community. And what we built on that weekend was a sense of community with folks that we normally wouldn't. So I think that for me was very transformational. And just as Pete said, being on the edge of the water it's really, it's therapy. It's really therapeutic. And we were on the edge of that water, we were praying, and we were together. It was really, you got this incredible sense of wonder and how amazing sea is, water is, and life is. So it was a great weekend. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. You just the last point is so often we wonder, we live in segregated areas. And we live in kind of homogenous zones, and we wonder how can we, be friends with folks that are not like us. When you go, everybody likes to fish. All cultures fish. Rich people fish, poor people fish. There's something that connects with everybody. So when you are out, you can just walk up to some strangers, which you can't really do that. I'm like the only one that likes to do that outside of fishing. But you can walk up to them, and you have something is already connecting. You say, hey, catching anything? What are you using? And it's something that neither person possesses that links you together. So when you fish with people who, I think that one future pathway to racial reconciliation is to fish together so that you're shoulder to shoulder facing in the same direction at what God has made, and you're organizing around friendships and right relationship, doing something that people love outside in God's creation. So lots of different ways that fishing can help. Our next fish thing where we're fishing together with some spiritual practices is January the 27th. January the 28th. January the 28th. Okay, so if you have any questions, everybody is invited. It's intergenerational. This is another great. Do you have people in your life that might want to fish that don't come to church? This is perfect. This is a perfect way to bring people into the life and ministry of St. Mary's and lower the barriers. Amen? Amen. All right, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, brother. Good to see you. So what? Oh, yeah.
I love it.
Greatest thing ever.
Awesome. I predict it. John's like, what's your readiness for it?
Oh, yeah. Do you have one, Tim?
I told him he has to get married.
And it gets better and better.
You're the one I have to thank for that.
I got a lot to do today.
Were you slacking
I
yesterday?
had like a 93 readiness list. And then 87. I went totally clean on my diet. So. But it's amazing because, like,
Morning. Nicely done. Nice talking.
I didn't see you out there. If I had, I would have called on you and maybe say something.
My fishing stories can sometimes last too long.
Mine too.
They catch them and they eat them, which is like a lot of people don't. But yeah,
I'm gonna go home.
yeah.
I gotta be back here at 5. Right? We still doing church at 5? Great job.
Oh, thanks.
Preface of baptism. Proper prefaces are in the Book of Common Prayer. Oh, there's altar. So it should be marked.